Howard Griffith. This is, of course, the Monday Schmooze, and we'll get into all of the news from the Big Ten from this weekend. I'll also get you into Mel Tucker in a moment, but just real quick thoughts on what we saw on the field this weekend.
Yeah, I think we saw some good from the contenders that we believed, and you know, some of them didn't necessarily have the world's most challenging opponents, but you saw a lot of what gets us excited about those teams.
And I think that's important because they started to gain that confidence that we thought that they would have. Now, on the other side, there were some teams that we were feeling pretty good about that didn't have the type of performances this week that we expected of them.
Lots to talk about, and we're going to get into every team coming up in the next hour, but we do need to delve into the biggest news, our big story, obviously coming out of East Lansing, developing yesterday. Michigan State suspending head coach Mel Tucker without pay after USA Today revealed that Tucker is the subject of a Title IX investigation alleging that he sexually harassed prominent sexual assault awareness speaker Brenda Tracy, who the university had hired on a couple of occasions to speak to the team. Harlan Barnett's been named the interim coach, while former head coach Mark D'Antonio will return and serve as associate head coach.
Upon receiving the reports from the claimant regarding Mel Tucker, MSU's Office of Civil Rights immediately commenced a review of subsequent investigation per university protocol using an outside third-party investigator. I was aware of the report in late December. The external investigator concluded their review and submitted their investigative report on July 25th with the recommendation for a formal hearing, which will occur the week of October 5th. The university's objective has been and remains focused on conducting a fair, thorough, and unbiased investigation and allowing the processes to play out. This includes protecting confidentiality of the claimant and putting in place interim measures. The university's formal conclusion of the investigation will occur once the hearing and final decision processes are complete. I want to emphasize again, this investigation is not complete. Interim measures are something that are constantly evaluated throughout the process based on developments that may have a potential impact on the ongoing investigation. As there have been new developments before the hearing, and with the best interests of everyone, including student athletes and the university community in mind, I have suspended Mel Tucker without pay as an additional interim measure. While the investigation continues, I made this decision with the support of university leadership.
So that is AD Alan Haller. Nicole, help us understand what happened here. I think one thing that was not made clear in this news conference yesterday that might have helped people understand this is that when a Title IX claim is made, as this one was in December, the university is aware that a claim has been made, but not aware of the details. And until they saw the story in USA Today yesterday, we're not aware of the details. So help us understand kind of where this started and where we got to yesterday.
Yeah, so this started in basically the timeline that Alan Haller described, right? So you get the complaint in December, they immediately hire an outside Title IX attorney, and she investigates and supports and submits a report in July about what her recommendation is that this then goes to a hearing. Now, we know that's been scheduled for the bye week. That's the week of October 5th. Now, looking back on who knew what when, we do know that is my understanding that Alan Haller, he mentioned he was aware of this in December, and he had some additional information because he had to come up with those interim measures that he mentioned during the press conference. But the information in the report from July, which we saw a lot cited in that USA Today article, that was only submitted to the claimant and the respondent. That's not information that the leadership at Michigan State had. So they, just like us, reading that report late Saturday night or Sunday morning, that's when they became aware of the scope of this, who was involved, because Brenda Tracy, the activist, put her name on it, and that's her right to tell the story. So they got a lot of that information just like we did, and with that new information, they decided it was time to suspend Mel Tucker.
And again, that probably could have and should have been clarified at the news conference. I think it would have helped people understand a little bit better in terms of what was going on, why the decision was made yesterday. Probably could have taken some more questions to to clarify that. But again, I think Michigan State kind of making it clear that they followed the protocol to the T. This is the way that you are supposed to handle it, and they handled it in exactly that manner. And so now we arrive at this situation with Mel Tucker suspended, without pay, Harlan Barnett stepping in, Mark D'Antonio coming back to play a role in the football program as well. For people, Michigan State fans know who Harlan Barnett is. He was an All-American there, played for George Perlis, has been on the staff for a long time under D'Antonio and Tucker. But maybe for Big Ten fans who don't know, give us a sense of what this means for Michigan State.
Yeah, as you've mentioned, he played and coached with Coach D'Antonio at Cincinnati, and also was GA'd for Nick Saban at LSU. So he has an extensive football background, particularly as a defensive back. But he's a guy who is a lifer when you talk about people that really respect and appreciate where he's come from, Michigan State. He truly has a hunger for this program to be the very best. But I think one of the things that's truly important in this particular occasion, in this situation, he's got his finger on the pulse of what this team needs right now. And he's someone that those players are going to be able to come to and talk about what's going on. And he's going to be forthright with them because he wants Michigan State to be in the best position that they can be in. This is a tough situation for everyone involved. But I think the most important people that are involved are the student athletes. And I think that's why removing Mel Tucker when they did was important. So now that, listen, we're talking about a football game. There's obviously a case that's out there, but we have to put those young people in the best position they can be in so they can continue to enjoy their experience at Michigan State.
Yeah, and they absolutely had to do this. Yeah. I mean, there was no question as you wake up Sunday morning that Mel Tucker could coach this team against Washington. So it was the right move. There'll be questions about should it have happened sooner? How is this going to unfold when the final report is made after the hearing? We'll probably get more answers. It
would have been an untenable situation for him to go forward coaching just because now the story is out there in public and an incredible distraction. So you'll let the process play out now. First week in October, as you said, is when the hearing occurs, and then we'll see what that board determines and where it goes from there. But as you mentioned, we got Washington for Michigan State on the schedule this week, and that was going to be enough of a challenge as it was. Washington is really good with Michael Penix. Going to be a huge challenge for Harlan Barnett's secondary, see whether or not they can hold up and just how improved they are. And now, of course, a lot of other things swirling around that program. Latest top 25 did come out yesterday. 4 Big Ten teams and 4 future Big Ten teams are in the rankings. Michigan State's at number 2, Ohio State down to 6, Texas, USC, and Florida State all moving up ahead of the Buckeyes this week. Penn State holds steady at 7, while Iowa is back in at number 25. So let's run through those teams in the top 7. Get a sense of what you guys thought of their weekend performances. Michigan, really no problem with UNLV. Howard J.J. McCarthy continues to be incredibly accurate. What stood out to you as you watched the Wolverines?
One of the things that was important for me, I wanted to see this offensive line gain that confidence that they didn't have that first week. They reestablished the line of scrimmage 2, 3, 4 yards down, moving that defensive line. I thought that was an important part. Listen, they were going to outmatch their opponent, but it's still, I talk about this time of the year with confidence. And now that offensive line, with their offensive line coach being back on the sideline, really gave them a big plus and a big push.
J.J. McCarthy's basically been perfect. I mean, his completion percentage for 2 games, you could really be asking for more from the passing game and what we're seeing from him. And they're doing what they need to do against opponents like this. And I think that's what's really encouraging. No one was expecting much of a challenge, right, from these first 2 games. But I think that we've really learned that they're honing the different things about the passing game. We saw some really good things in the run game. Roman Wilson, obviously a focal point as a receiver. So there's just a lot that you can build on. We talked about the confidence and just trying to become a complete team.
Yeah, I think what else is really interesting, contrast this to where they were last year, running the football all the time, and people were complaining about it. You can't run the football, you can't throw it. You're going to have to throw it at some particular point. So I think they're doing a masterful job of really putting these players in the best position and putting them in a place, particularly offensively, where they can do it all. This, once again, is going to be a tough team to try to defend. What do you want to take away, the run or the pass?
To your point, J.J. McCarthy's been amazing. Now, 2 straight games, 85% completion percentage or better. That had happened one time in Michigan history. Elvis Gerbach had done it, and now J.J.'s done it back-to-back games, so he's the first, obviously, to do that. Really phenomenal performances by J.J. McCarthy. They got Bowling Green this week. Sharon Moore will be the acting head coach in that game, and then Jim Harbaugh returns.
How about some more responsibility for him?
Yes,
offensive
exactly.
coordinator, offensive line coach,
Right.
I'll throw a head coach at it as well.
That game is on the Big Ten Network, as is the Rutgers game the following week. So next 2 weeks we'll have Michigan on our air. Had Ohio State on our air this week, 35-7 over Youngstown State. There were questions about the Buckeyes coming out of week one and the performance, particularly the offense against Indiana. Do you feel like some of those questions were answered in this game, or do you feel like the jury's still out?
Well, I think the jury is ultimately just going to be still out because of the level of competition. I mean, this is a team that we compare to one team, maybe two. Penn State's going to be really good, and that's going to be a good test for them. But there's so much that we won't know until the end of the season with Ohio State. But one thing I will say, I thought it was really interesting that Ryan Day was very unenthused after this game, and he wasn't very happy with the scoring, but also just how few times they found the end zone. And I was looking at their touchdown rate over 2 games. It's only 50%. So you don't want to be settling for field goals, but you also want to be pushing the ball down the field. He thinks that they should win by more against an opponent like Youngstown State, and he is correct. And so I think that not satisfied mentality is what they need right now.
I think one of the things that's come out and really played out the last 2 weeks in his comments when you listen to him or read about him is that he's concerned about the inefficiency of this offense because they're not getting as many plays because of the way teams are playing them. They're playing keep away. They're waiting till that play clock gets down before they snap it. So they're kind of controlling the game a little bit. So Ohio State offensively has to be that much better and that much more efficient when they're moving the ball up and down the field to be able to take advantage of it because you don't know how many possessions you're going to have. You couple that with the defense not being able to get off the field in third downs, that becomes a problem. So they've addressed some of the issues of the big plays, and I'm sure that the competition had something to do with that. But now they need to be able to get off the field to get that offensive football back.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, 34 minutes of possession time for Youngstown State. They were 7 of 15 on third down. And then Ohio State, through 2 games, they are last in the Big Ten in third down conversion percentage. They are 7 of 24. Now, I think Indiana's defense might be pretty good. I think we'll get a sense as the year goes on. But again, all due respect to Youngstown State, they're a good team that plays at a lower level than Ohio State does. This is a team you shouldn't have issues converting against. And we saw Ohio State have some. And so you understand why Ryan Day might be a little frustrated. Western Kentucky coming up this week, and then they have the huge one against Notre Dame. And Notre Dame looks good. Like Sam Hartman is a big-time quarterback. He is really good, and Notre Dame is cruising, and that's going to be a huge test for Ohio State. They got a week to figure it out.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've seen, or really this stood out so much to me the last year or so, is just if you have that difference maker under center, it changes everything. It's able to hide so many of your other possible flaws that you have. And we're watching that happen in Notre Dame right now. This offense is really humming.
Yeah, and that's what we expect. I'm sorry, Nicole, but that's what we expect from Ohio State. Because year in and year out, Ohio State has a quarterback.
Right, we're talking about like the elite quarterbacks, and that's been the difference for Notre Dame. We've had good quarterbacks, but what does it look like? How high is that ceiling with an elite quarterback? And you're absolutely right. That's what we pencil in every single year for Ohio State.
Yeah, no doubt. It looks like Penn State might have an elite quarterback in Drew Aller.
To say the least.
He's really good. Now, again, you factor in level of competition. Delaware is Delaware. This is not. This is not
the kind of score that Ohio State would have liked.
Yeah, no, absolutely, right? This is kind of what it should look like. 63-7. It was never in doubt. We've already seen Penn State beat West Virginia. Questionable how good West Virginia is going to be this year, but Penn State has looked the part to this point.
They absolutely have. I mean, again, you can't really be asking for more from Drew Aller. I think that's been, a major bright spot for Penn State. And then the run game. I mean, you're getting both running backs involved. They're productive. They're running the ball in goal line situations, and they're getting their guys into the end zone. The one thing, if you're nitpicking, which is what we do with these top teams, is they haven't really had those explosive runs. They haven't had those breakaway plays. And Howard, I don't know how concerned we should be because they're going to have those. They have incredible athletes, and these are players who've done that last year. But that's the only thing that I haven't seen really out of the run game or the offense.
So we've got more to look forward to.
Yeah.
Hey, we need some other checks, right? That's where we need big plays in the run game. And you're right. I think they will come. But just to watch this team move around, and you talk about the way Michigan is playing, Penn State, they're playing really well. Both of these teams are playing at a high level, regardless of the competition. Again, I'll say it again. I want you to be efficient when I look at these teams against some of the competition that they're playing at the moment. And though these two teams, Penn State and Ohio State, are playing that way, defensively, they're going to continue to be who they are. And I think I'm really excited to just watch this team when they go against some elite talent, because I think the way this team has been built, recruited to, is really a big strength of what they're trying to do and get themselves into not only a Big Ten championship, but possibly the playoffs.
Defense really good. They gave up 5 first downs to Delaware. I hear you on the explosion plays. I think if we hadn't seen them last year from Singleton, right?
Yeah,
like
they'll come. They'll have to come.
They will. They did have the one long pass play. I know you're talking about long run plays. They had the one long pass play to Keandre Lambert-Smith in the West Virginia game. But this appears to be a really complete team. It appears to be James Franklin's best team. They go to Illinois this week. We'll talk about the Illini in a bit. I think that game 2 weeks ago maybe seemed like a bigger and sterner test, but people are going to be fired up in Champaign. It's the big noon game. I think there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm around the program. And then you've got Iowa coming up the following week. So we'll learn a lot about Penn State here in the next couple weeks, but they have looked very good in getting themselves to 2-0, holding steady at number 7 in the country. A big stat brought to you by Gatorade. Iowa winning Saturday, as Iowa does, 20-13 against Iowa State. Hawks got a defensive TD and a pick 6. They had just 235 yards of offense. It marked the 14th time this century they've won a game with fewer than 250 yards of offense. That is 4 more than any other school in that span. And yet here they are. They're 2-0, exactly as might have been anticipated. They beat an Iowa State team in Ames, a team that beat them last year in Iowa City. It just seems like this is what it's going to be. There's been some upgrades in talent, particularly at the quarterback spot, but they're not suddenly going to be some wide open, crazy attack.
Yeah, this was a very comforting, comfortable win, I think, for Iowa fans. I mean, this is the way that they win football games. It's defense, it's special teams, it's field positions, complementary football. And I thought it was funny, Cade McNamara, I didn't take it as a shot at Michigan, by the way, in the post game, but him saying, like, oh my gosh, my defense scores points. Like, that's so nice to have.
Yeah, right.
But that is like part of the deal when you're an Iowa quarterback. That is who they are. They get defensive points. And so, that ended up being the difference maker, really. They were able to kind of control the game after they got that pick 6.
I think so much was made about what this offense ultimately was going to be. It's who they are. I mean, this, as far as scheme is concerned, they've had some players that they've upgraded at positions, but I think because Cade has not had as much practice time with them in the summer, I think that's going to come. Those big plays and being able to connect on some of the deep balls will happen. So I think it's still a wait and see approach, but we know who they are. They're not all of a sudden getting ready to come out with 4 and 5 wide receivers and start running spread. That's never who they've been, and they're sticking to what their formula for winning has always been: solid defense, special teams, and then also being able to move the ball offensively.
Pretty good formula, too, for Kirk Ferentz. It is
200?
win number 200 for him, yes, in his coaching career. That includes some wins at Maine, but the overwhelming majority of them in Iowa. It's a long time. Yeah, you've been at this a long time, man. Yeah, that's what it tells you. Yeah. 25 years for Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. And congratulations to him. Truly one of the good guys that we cover in this league. And again, 200. He'll go for 201 against Western Michigan coming up on Saturday. How about Purdue going down to Virginia Tech? They endure a 5.5-hour rain delay.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy. And I think it's one thing if you're the home team, right? Because you're in your home locker room, you're in familiar surroundings, you have kind of everything that you need right there with you. But you don't anticipate something like this if you're the road team. And they were talking, Ryan Walters said he told his guys to go take walks around the concourse and just kind of stay loose.
What else are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
But it's a real testament to Purdue to go down, to beat Virginia Tech. I know Virginia Tech hasn't been great here lately, but still a Power 5 opponent on the road. It's a good win.
It's still a hostile environment, at least when the game starts.
Yes, right? Less hostile 5.5 hours.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, this is strategy. This is strategy.
Exactly. But I still think you still have to have your team prepared to be able to go on the road, to go into that type of environment. And then to have the weather become a huge part of the story is something you don't really account for. The equipment guys have got everything they need, but you still don't have the creature comforts that you would have in your own locker room. So you have to make adjustments. But kudos to this team and this coaching staff of keeping these guys together to be able to fight through those things. And I thought this would be a good football team. I think it just takes time. Like many things to do when we're talking about the early part of the season, the adjustments have to be made, and they've made some adjustments going into a road game, and they were able to come out with a victory.
Yeah, I thought it was really impressive. Just, again, the mental toughness and then what they were able to do, Hudson Card down the stretch to put that game away. And I also think we saw improvement defensively. How much did we talk about right here a week ago, third down defense and the problems that they had against Fresno State? So I think you're seeing this team get better and learn week to week. And coaches always say that, right? About week 1 to week 2. And we saw that play out for Purdue.
Gave up more than 200 fewer yards this week than they did in week 1. Ryan Walters is a defensive mastermind. You've got to feel like he'll get this thing straightened away on that side of the ball. Minnesota gets a win over Eastern Michigan. Was not overwhelming. It certainly didn't feel like it was in doubt, but some red zone issues got bogged down a little bit there. PJ Fleck expressed some frustration maybe afterwards of, hey, we do have to be better in situations like this, but also said, hey, you never look askance at a win. This is a win. They're 2-0. They got a nice conference win as well. They have to be feeling pretty good as they prepare for a huge test at North Carolina.
Yeah, and I think that what he was happy with was that they were committed to the run game, right? They wanted to see what it could be, what it could look like, different guys, different pieces. They've had so much change, right, from the roster and just some of the consistency and the continuity that we've seen from this team the last few years. So I think establishing the run game, seeing what works, what doesn't work was really important. And then the defense. No first downs in the second half for Eastern Michigan. That's really hard to do, even when you're playing a team that you are better than.
Yeah, it really is hard. But I think go back a week ago, they're throwing the ball all over the yard, right? And people were wondering,
can they run?
What is going on here? And they proved to us really quickly that they're still going to be able to run the football. There may have been questions about their offensive line play from week 1, but week 2 they really, I think, settled down to who they are. Now, I think they'll still throw it around, but I do believe they want to be a run-first team and be able to set up the pass.
56 rushing attempts, most they had had since 1977. And again, you contrast that with week 1 where they only ran the ball 25 times. They threw 19 more passes than they had rushing attempts. Here, it was completely flipped. You run the ball 56 times, you only throw it 15. I think this is more what we're expecting from Minnesota. Again, we'll see their defense, which is elite, to use a phrase of PJ Fleck's, is going to get a huge test against Drake May in North Carolina. How about Northwestern? What a good win. Northwestern was the underdog going into the game against UTEP. We all know what disarray things have been in this offseason. Not only did they beat UTEP, they beat them by 31 points. They put up the most points they put up since 2020. And I think you just have to give a lot of credit to David Braun. This is a really tough spot to be thrown into. This is a man who had never coached in the FBS in any situation, let alone as a head coach. They played really poorly in the first game and turned it around and played very well on Saturday.
Yeah, I think you talk about the coaches and the players being able to be dialed in and focused, and they needed to have a refocus after the performance from week 1, and they were able to do that. You watch them be able to run the ball, be able to make plays in the passing game, things that after watching them week 1, you're wondering, what's happening here? What has really happened? So they're going to go out and compete. And you talked about Coach Brown. I think he's going to do the best job possible in this situation. He really has the kids' best interests at heart, and I think that it's just a matter of them continuing to play hard and try to stay as focused as they can on their opponents and themselves to be able to get wins.
And I do think it's worth pointing out, like, this was a challenging situation. You do come in as an underdog. UTEP scores on their opening drive, and
easily.
Then you score 38 unanswered points. You have 3 different quarterbacks get involved in this. Your defense plays well. You get sacks, you get interceptions. They responded well within the game, within all of the other adversity that they are dealing with, and I think that deserves some credit too.
Yeah, no doubt. No, really, really impressive. It ends a 12-game losing streak, which was the longest in the nation. They ran it, as you said, Howard, 184 yards after 12 in week 1.
Right.
Cam Porter looked pretty good. Lines of scrimmage are going to be an issue.
That's going to be a challenge all year.
Yeah. But the offensive line certainly looked better than it did in week 1. They go down, they'll play Duke on Saturday. Duke is pretty good. They're really good, nationally ranked team, obviously, this year. Maryland, speaking of responding to in-game adversity, Nicole.
Did not expect that.
No, I mean, Charlotte went right through them on the opening drive, and then Tagovailoa throws a pick 6 on the first drive from scrimmage for Maryland. So you're down 14-0 before you can blink an eye, but came back and ended up winning pretty handily. What did you take from the Terps?
Yeah, we talk about turnovers so often when we talk about Maryland, and it's about putting yourself in a better position, and that's what Maryland needs to do, right? You can't put yourself in that hole. You can't have turnovers like that. It's certainly impressive the way that they responded, and I think Mike Locksley struck the right tone afterwards of like, we're glad we won, but no one's happy with this because we should not have been in some of these situations. So I think that's the right approach because you're going to be in tougher games than this, but you did learn something about coming out and digging your way out of that hole.
Right, and that's the most important part. Again, go back to what you learn against teams that you should be able to control. You better make sure you're paying attention to details. You can't take anything for granted, and being able to respond is something that it's hard to manufacture. You can't manufacture that unless you're in a game situation. So to watch the team respond has got to make this the university and obviously their fan base really excited about where this team can go.
Continue to dominate non-conference opposition, 30 or more points in 9 straight non-conference games, which is the longest streak in school history. Little more of a test coming up on Friday night. They have Virginia. This is not a great Virginia team by any stretch, but renewal of a traditional ACC rivalry should be a fun game in College Park. Again, that game is Friday night. Rutgers gets another win, knocking off Temple in fairly dominant fashion. We've seen 2 really good performances from this defense, Howard, and you have to give a lot of credit to Joe Harris-Simiak. It feels like they are starting to build a legitimate Big Ten defense, and then they're comfortable enough on offense. Gavin Wimsatt seems to have settled in. So I think a lot of positives around the Scarlet Knights.
They really are. They're playing the game the way they want to play it. They want to be physical. We always know that about his teams. They're going to be physical, control the line of scrimmage. That's always going to be a big part. Running the ball, being able to be efficient in the pass game. But defensively, when you play that way, and you're able to make plays and be stifling, that's going to give that offense more opportunities. So that's big.
Yeah, that was my main takeaway again, the defense. And we saw a lot of good last year. Get banged up, you get worn down as the season goes on. But that's clearly what the identity of this program is going to be and where they can really lean into it. Again, we did see some good things in the offense, but we're talking about Iowa and complementary football. That's what Rutgers needs. They need to have that defense kind of be their anchor.
That's how Greg Schiano wants to win. It's how he's won. Historically, they want to be really solid on D, and we're seeing that.
Yeah, and I think that is the right thing to do for this team right now. I mean, to play the game the way they're playing it. And what you're seeing here is a head coach put a plan together that best suits their team. They're not trying to score 1 million points because that's not going to be beneficial for this defense. So it's good to see them playing their own way when everybody else is throwing the ball all over the field. That you still have some teams now, and we'll talk about Indiana as well, but are playing a game that best suits who they are right now.
And they don't need a ton of points if you play well defensively. I mean, you go back to the beginning of last year when they score 16 or more points, which is not a particularly high threshold, 16 points. They're 6-2. So, you know, again, some of that was lesser competition early on last year. But if you can do that, maybe you can figure out a way to count to 6, get back to a bowl game.
That's what I was going to say. These are 2 big wins for them because, yes, they were emphatic and they looked really good doing it, but also you got to get to 6.
Yeah.
And these are 2 that get you there. You're a third of the way.
Virginia Tech coming up this week. So another Big Ten team against the Hokies.
Get
them at home. Be interesting to see how they fare against them. Indiana played Friday night. They played Indiana State. Indiana State clearly not going to be very good at the FCS level this year. I mean, really overmatched. But that's a credit to the Hoosiers also to overmatch Indiana State. Looking good. It feels like maybe we've settled the quarterback.
It looks like
David Jackson looked pretty good.
It looked really good.
Yeah.
And we know how important that position is going to be if you're trying to really move this offense and be able to make plays. But I think the other thing that was huge for them is defensively, they gained a lot of confidence in that area. I really like this defensive line when I saw them in the summer and in a linebacking group. So I think they're right where they want to be. Again, playing the game the way they want to play the game, not necessarily what's going on around them.
558 total yards of offense. I mean, this was exactly the get-right game that they needed, where they can work out what they want this offense to look like. And again, yeah, Taven Jackson looked terrific. But this is what they want to do, right? Like, we were able to see the plan and the things that they wanted to implement, the different playmakers they want to rely on. So again, it's not going to work as perfectly when you're not playing, an FCS opponent, but it was good to see what the plan is.
And defensively, they were phenomenal, held Indiana State under 100 yards. And you couple that with the defensive performance against Ohio State, which was really sound, and you say to yourself, okay, maybe this is a pretty good D. They got Jeff Brom and Louisville coming up in Indianapolis on Saturday. That'll be a big challenge. We know how wide open Jeff Brom's offenses can be, how difficult they are to defend. So we'll get a gauge. Again, sometimes you don't really know until you see him. We saw him against Ohio State and got a sense of, maybe the offense needs some work. We'll see where that defense is after they face the Cardinals. Wisconsin went on the road Saturday and lost to Washington State, just the Badgers' third regular season non-conference road loss in the last 20 years. The offense was the culprit. 3 turnovers, limited big plays, a huge drop-off in the run game as compared to week 1, as they were held to just 90 yards 1 week after going over 300. I think we need to preface this by saying Washington State's good. So I don't think there's huge shame in losing to Washington State, but the manner in which they lost, Howard, the self-inflicted wounds, you have a fumble return for a touchdown, 3 turnovers, and the inability to run the ball. After a week ago, we looked at it and said, well, this is same old Wisconsin. They're going to be able to plow people over. What do you take from it?
You have to really wonder where the run game is, right? After the performances you just mentioned a week ago, and then you come back this week and they didn't run the ball. They weren't as efficient as they needed to be. And again, you can't, we always talk, go on the road, can't turn the football over. You just can't do it, particularly when it turns into points. So that's just something that they have to continue to try to work on and try to fix. But I think this is still a good team. But it really, I think, speaks to just how good, Washington State probably really is, because not to be able to hold the Badgers to this type of run numbers, what it was, a 69 between their top 2 backs, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
No, and it was a tough environment. I mean, it was electric in Pullman, and it meant so much clearly to a lot of people there that they put on a show like they did against a Power 5 opponent and win a game like that. But it's a lot of the same things that we felt going in, right? Were they going to be able to get enough pressure on Cam Ward? Were they going to be able to protect their quarterbacks? Were they going to be able to run the ball? Like, all of these things we still have questions about, I think, coming out of a performance like that, just because, again, you have 2 very different performances out of the Wisconsin offense. So we do still need to see, like, what is or better representative of what we're going to see against, Big Ten opponents.
Yeah, no doubt. They get Georgia Southern coming up this week. Then they go to Purdue, which I think is a pretty interesting game for both of those teams. Get a sense for where each one of them stands against a team that perhaps they'll measure themselves against as the year goes along. What about Nebraska? We were talking about the turnovers for Wisconsin. I mean, turnovers again. The story for Nebraska, Nicole, 4 more. So this is the second straight week that they've had 4 turnovers. They're doing a lot of things well. I'm particularly on defense. Like, I thought the defense played really well early in the game. Yes. They lead the nation in sacks right now. So there are things to like about Nebraska, but until they figure out the offense and stop shooting themselves in the foot, it's just hard to see them doing a whole lot.
Yeah, exactly the same takeaway. I mean, like, at the half, you're feeling okay about how you're performing and that you're in the game. And yeah, there's some points on the board for Colorado, but you feel like you're right in there defensively. Yeah. And then it just implodes, right? And Jeff Sims, it's just so hard to have a lot of confidence in him as a quarterback. You had the broadcast calling for a quarterback change. Yeah. It never happens, but he just continually was putting them in bad spots. He was putting the defense in bad spots. He was putting his teammates in bad spots. And then it's very quickly too big of a hole to climb out of. And so I think that's really the problem. It is those self-inflicted wounds, but also you need to have confidence in who you have at the quarterback position.
And I think that's the challenge, because they want to have the confidence in Sims. They have it, and that's why they continue to put him back out there, clearly believe that he's the best person to get this team to where they need to be. And Coach Rule talked about a couple of those when there was a motion man and the snap, and so he didn't know who that was on. He'd had to wait to figure that out after watch film. But you just can't, because they were there. I thought Tony White did an amazing job in the first half as far as slowing this Colorado team down and being able to address some of the issues. But once the turnovers started happening, given a short field, it just became too much for what that offense is right now.
Well, and that's when Colorado was able to do what they wanted to do offensively. I mean, Sean Lewis was able to call what he wanted, and we saw a lot of what we saw from Colorado in week 1 against TCU. And that's getting the ball to their playmakers in space, the bigger plays, the explosive plays, and that's when it went downhill.
That's a fun team to watch.
They are a fun team.
Very fun team to watch.
Yes, their fans seem to enjoy it, too. For the first time in a long time, fans are having fun in Boulder. Nebraska does head home. I mean, part of the challenge has been you play your first 2 games on the road, which is extremely unusual for a power conference team. But again, that a function of having the early conference game. They'll take on Northern Illinois coming up on Saturday. So maybe you can get a win and start feeling better about yourself, although Northern went to Boston College and won. So we shall see. Illinois, this is the team that has befuddled me the most to this point so far, Howard. They were extremely fortunate to win in week 1 against Toledo. I'm literally 1 play away from losing the game. They converted a 4th down where the quarterback admitted afterward he never saw the receiver. And Frere answered. Still, you win the game, and it was against a good Toledo team, a team that might win the MAC. This is a really good Kansas team. Like, let's just say Kansas is fun. Like, holy cow.
Another one of
Jalen Daniels.
Welcome to the bandwagon.
Awesome.
I've been on this for a year now. Welcome.
Awesome. I mean, he is really
We got to get out more. That's the problem. We got to get out more.
You know, we watch a lot of Big Ten in our green room. I saw the highlights
I tried to
last
tell
year,
you guys this
and I
about
sat
you.
down and watched an entire Kansas game. I'll be the first to admit I had not. I'm glad I have now. However, Illinois, both lines of scrimmage, Howard, what's going on?
I don't think they know yet, but they better hurry up and fix it pretty quickly because the talent and experience is there. But you talk about one of the things they're facing in the last 2 weeks, quarterbacks that know what they want to do with the football can make plays and get the ball out. But you've got to be able to make tackles. You can't let the ball get leveraged and put you in a position where you're in a trail spot. So they've got to figure it out. They've made changes. I shouldn't say made changes, but they have new people calling plays. There are different things going on, and I know it takes time, but they've got to start to play more of a physical game at the line of scrimmage, and we're not seeing that right now.
Yeah, new coordinator. They had turnover in the roster. They got guys in the NFL, but I'm with you, Dave. I mean, I think what we've seen from Illinois so far and what we saw from them last year, the biggest surprise that there's been such a drop-off so far. And again, Kansas was going to be a challenge, but Kansas is also the type of program that you should be able to beat, right? Even when Kansas is good, even when Kansas has explosiveness in the offense, they called a great game, but they were just constantly stressing this defense and taking advantage of the issues that you were just talking about, Howard. So very curious to see how Illinois responds here and how they're going to match up against those West teams.
And we're talking about a team that led the nation in scoring defense a year ago. They're giving up more than 30 points per game after allowing 13 last year. They've allowed more than 400 yards in each of their first 2 games. It never happened once last year. They never allowed over 400 yards. Happened twice in the first 2 weeks, and then we got Penn State coming in this week. So things certainly don't get any easier in Champaign.